Question from Todd. Uh, it feel uh, it feels as though every flavor of scandal, both public and private, is broadcast in real time to everyone's phones 24/7 these days. Every awful detail laid out at excruciating length on Twitter threads or YouTube videos. Also, with the Pope's declining health, we are already seeing jockeying and politicking in Rome. This got me thinking of Charles's discussion about personal versus impersonal governments. How could a personal government exist in the social media age? Rumors and whispers about court impropriety have existed since the first monarch was crowned. But imagine if the common folk had cell phone footage of Pope John the XII swearing by pagan gods at dice games or other sordid affairs. What if the French peasantry was able to watch a podcast with a whistleblower on the Tour de Nail affair and Isabella's scheming in France and England? Can a personal government survive in this age of social media? Doesn't it need a layer of protection for some of its legitimacy? Imagine if children knew every sin and foible of their parents. Are we doomed to impersonal government so long as we live in the information age? Hmm.
Well, it's a very good question. I hope not. Uh, I really hope not. You know, part of the problem, of course, is that most of us are not well enough informed to really have an opinion about the sorts of stuff that get thrown at us every day.
Hmm.
We just don't. Uh, we have a we have prejudices. We have a set of views that we try to and are told we have to fit everything into. But we don't really know, and we get a piece of information we don't even know what it means, really. Uh, well, a good example of what I mean. You know that, of course, the common wisdom has always been that Prince Charles, as he was, King Charles, as he is now, is something of an idiot and a moron, to say nothing of an adulterer. An awful lot of people think that. Uh, because every single scandal that he ever undergoes gets exposed and is never forgotten.
Hmm.
But the good things he does are not remembered. And we had a good example of this was the Black Spider letters. I think we've discussed these before, but they're worth going back from a different point of view. All right, so what were the Black Spider letters? Well, it so happens that when he was Prince of Wales, uh, if people had problems with the government department or a bureaucratic thing or whatever, uh, and they wrote to Prince Charles about it, I'm having a problem with this, that, or the other, and it caught his attention, he would make inquiry and he would write to the requisite government office or ministry or whatever to find out what the story was. And if he could intervene, he would. Well, these were called black spider letters because of his unique handwriting, which is very thin and very, well, in black ink. So they called them the black spider letters. These were considered privileged communications between the prince and the government, and so were not to be revealed. The Manchester Guardian, the socialist rag, thought that they would, if revealed, they would hold up the prince as the moron, etc., that he's supposed to be, according to the popular imagination created by the media. This is an example, by the way, of the media believing its own crap. My father always used to say, never believe your own press. Well, the press really should be careful about believing its own effluvia. Anyway, so what do? They sue the government to get the black spider letters exposed and printed. The government fight back in the courts, hammer and tongs. Oddly enough, and this caught my attention immediately, although nobody commented on it, Clarence House, then the Prince of Wales household, was contacted. They said, "Oh, no, we don't have an opinion. It's for the courts to decide. And that was it. Finally, the courts decide, all right, they break the government and force them to expose the black spider letters. Initially, the Guardian crowed with victory. Why? Well, now they had won. The government had to provide the black spider letters to the public. Within a week, that was the end of the story. Why? Because if you read the black spider letters, instead of the clueless moron that the Guardian would like the king to be, he came across as a very well informed, very well intentioned, very caring individual. And the politicians of both parties and the endless bureaucrats that he was dealing with came across as the munchkins and morons they tend to be. So all of a sudden, the Guardian wasn't interested. Well, it's a non-news. The problem is that the Guardian forms opinions. They're obviously not the only ones to do so. So, what am I saying with all this? It is true that everything is exposed. The problem is how it's exposed and where and when and why. And most people, I'm sorry to say, all of us at some time, most of us all the time, do not have the critical faculties to separate the wheat from the chaff. We don't have the knowledge. And how could we? You know, when you get bombarded with facts and figures, I don't know what they mean. I don't know how true they are. You can tell me right now that it's been shown that $450 million were paid by U.S. aid to Colombian pearl divers for the sake of gay pride, uh, uh, gay pride leaflets. Is that true? I don't know. I'm supposed to get outraged, or I'm supposed to be happy, depending on who's giving it to me and why, and also who and what I am. But it's actually, even if it's true, it's in a certain sense meaningless because I don't have the background to really understand what it all means. Do you see what I'm saying?
I do. I do.
So, as long as we have this fiction of popular representation, uh, and as long as we believe it and fail to hold the powers that be accountable, and how we would do that, I increasingly fail to understand. Well, we're going to have more of the same. Now, the alternative to that is, I don't know what, fury, revolution, destruction, bring it all down, shoot them, hang them high. Oh, that would be great. I guess the best thing one could do is to develop a technology that somehow cuts through all of this stuff. But then, if you were somehow able to do that, you would have to establish for a lot of people its effectiveness. In other words, if I had a BS meter that could infallibly decode all the garbage that's thrown at me, that's great. But now I would somehow have to prove to the great public that it works. And you can be assured that all the major players who whose positions would be endangered would do everything they could to destroy its legitimacy. You know, I don't know. I don't know if you remember when Schwarzenegger was governor of California.
Yeah.
But what destroyed his governorhood, what really turned him into a lame duck pretty early on in his reign, was when he tackled the unions. Because, as you know, if you belong to a union, regardless of your own political views, you pay money into the union, and part of what you pay goes to their political fund, their PAC, and they support whichever candidates they choose to support, and you have no voice over that. You just pay. You pay and obey, and that's it. Well, especially this was particularly the case at the time with the teachers union. So what happens? Schwarzenegger comes up with this great notion of having the unions forced to have votes by the membership on supporting the positions they take, that they take and fund. So, in other words, if I belong to the morons union, and you could easily imagine me being admitted to that, I belong to the morons union. The before they can support candidate A or candidate B, they have to have a referendum, a poll amongst the membership. And if the majority back candidate A, then that's who will back. If B, then B. Well, this was the idea that he floated, and this became a proposition on the ballot. Oh, did the unions scream? Oh, did they fight it tooth and nail? And oh, were their commercials against it effective? This would destroy democracy in California. Would it really? The majority of the members of a union having some voice in where its money goes, money that they themselves are paying. That would destroy democracy, wouldn't it? Exactly how would it? Doesn't matter. So it was absolutely shredded, and from that time on, he was kind of a lame duck. He gave up caring. Now, mind you, I'm not a big Schwarzenegger fan, but the point I'm making is I saw the difference before and after that uh, that election. Uh, and this is what I'm saying. You know, it seemed to me at the time incredible that any union member could think there was a problem with having a voice over how their money was spent. But they did. So in a setup like that, I don't know how you fix it.